Hi everyone, welcome to Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I'm Tim Durling, and on this episode I'm going to do an 8-track episode, which is one of my favorite subjects to do. And it's a band that I've been waiting on doing an 8-track episode on because, well, up till now there's still one that I'm missing. I've got all of the retail 8-tracks, and then I've got one of the RCOs, but there's one RCO that I'm missing from this band, and it is truly elusive. It's a really, really hard one to find. The band I'm talking about is Triumph, and it's a band that has been more active this year than in a long time. Of course, they reunited for a couple of shows here and there, sadly without bass player Mike Levine for health reasons, but and of course something else that I'll be talking about at the end of this episode. But I thought, okay, I'll do this episode on my Triumph 8-tracks, and then maybe I'll find that one last missing one and at some point do a reboot. But I don't know. I've been looking for this one particular title for a long time, and I cannot find it. So I'm going to go over what I have for my Triumph 8-tracks. And as I've explained on many episodes that I've done about Triumph, if you're watching this on a playlist, I've got lots of Triumph episodes and a Triumph playlist. So you could see me explaining the story behind their first 2 albums in Canada, and then they get signed internationally, and the album that comes out is a compilation. It's very much like AC/DC, being an Australian, then signing to Atlantic internationally. It's just really the same story. But the first Triumph album came out in Canada in 1976, and self-titled, and this is actually the first 8-track I found by them. And what's really odd about it is because without going into the complete story of it, there were 4 songs in this album that I'd never heard before because I didn't yet have the reissued version of their first album. They didn't come out for another couple of years. Unfortunately, even though I had a working 8-track player at the time that I found this, I think I found this back in 1994, there was no sound when I put this in. It played, but there was no sound, so I don't know if it got too close to a bulk eraser or a big magnet, which is basically what a bulk eraser was, but there was no sound on here. So I had to cool my heels for another year before I found the vinyl. Then I could listen to the songs, and then I eventually got the CD, the reissued CD. Anyway, so this only came out in Canada, and this is on Attic Records. You can see the kind of the logo there. There's 2 different versions of this logo. We'll see another one here in a minute. So it's a little beaten up, but I mean, I've had this for a long time. Got a kind of soft spot for it, but there you go. This was also the first time that I saw what the front cover looked like, and it's not great, but not any different than a lot of other 70s album covers. You look at the first Montrose album, that Orleans album, any number of Herbie Mann albums, but I digress. Also, I don't know if they did this on purpose, but that whole like fiery swirl I always thought was supposed to be shaped like Canada. Does anybody know about that? Kind of looks like, if you look at a map, that's kind of what Canada is shaped like. But anyway. All right, the second album was called Rock and Roll Machine. As most people know, it was reissued with a different track listing. It was like half the first album, half the second album, and RCA in the US put it out, called it Rock and Roll Machine. But the original Rock and Roll Machine album looked like this, came out in 1977. This is a much cleaner copy than the debut. It's actually sealed and in a slipcase. So I had heard the other songs on this album because I'd already found a used cassette of this. So I knew what like Little Texas Shaker and The City and those songs sounded like, but this is in pretty good shape. And I'm going to say this was a markdown, and there's 2 reasons for that. Number one is the hole punch, and then the other one is the $4 price tag. So this is how I bought it off eBay or wherever I got it a few years ago. And the slipcase is just a generic slipcase, but it also demonstrates that Attic was distributed by CBS Records in Canada at the time. For most of the 80s, they ended up being distributed by A&M, I think. And then at some point in the 90s, MCA, and then Universal took over, and then I think Attic morphed into, what did they become? I think Chinook, and then now it's all like under the Universal banner. But Attic was a pretty big Canadian label, like independent label. The next album that I've got to show you on 8-track is the international version of Rock and Roll Machine, even though there are still two different covers for this. This is a US copy on RCA Records. So it's got that band shot on stage. Cool band shot, I always thought. Very, very like lively 70s rock look to it. But when this album got reissued in the 80s, it had like a flying V on it. It looked more like the Allied Forces album. So this is what most people throughout the world thought the Rock and Roll Machine album was, and that this was their debut album, and the band themselves kind of played along with that from different merchandising and things. If you look inside their live album stages, it makes it look like this is where it all began. So in truth, it's half of each of their first two albums. So there you go. So after this, the issues of them get a little bit simpler. Next one was the first big Triumph album. It's one of their best, I think. 1979, Just a Game. And this is a Canadian version on Attic Records. So you see the Attic logo here, but then you see it here that's sort of the colors filled in. And I like that one too. It's sort of like a stained glass window. That's very soon would change into the, I don't know how you describe it, but the logo they used for most of the 80s. If you grew up in Canada, you probably, if you had like Lee Aaron or Haywire albums, and a lot of Roadrunner like metal albums, they had the Attic, the new Attic logo on them. But so this album was the same track listing throughout the world, and this is just a Canadian copy. Although I still think from the look of the sort of reddish orange case that this was still distributed by CBS Records. I just don't have a slipcase with this one to confirm it. So 1980, and from here on in, all I've got are US 8-tracks. Progressions of Power, and so this is US version on RCA Records, even though it still has an Attic Records logo on it. It's very much like when Rush signed with Atlantic at the end of the 80s. They'd still have an Anthem logo on all of their stuff, no matter where it came out in the world. So there you go, typical RCA looking tape. There's another Attic logo there again. And the last of the retail Triumph 8-tracks, 1981, and their most successful album, a platinum album in the US, Allied Forces. So this is the US RCA 8-track. Little tiny bit of bubbling, but not really in that bad a shape. And there's the back of it. Again, still got the Attic logo on it. Now, the next album, Never Surrender, came out in early 1983, and it is rare. It is a rare 8-track. It's not one you're likely to stumble upon in the wild, and chances are pretty good that it's an RCO. And when I say pretty good, there were a handful of 8-track releases that came out in 1983. Not many. Def Leppard's Pyromania being one of them. I think there's a Kenny Rogers one. And I know that Never Surrender came out right around the new year, like early in 1983. So it might exist as a retail release, but I don't think it does. I talk about that in my first book, Unspooled, an Adventure in 8-tracks. This goes into a lot of detail about when they stopped making 8-tracks and the record clubs like Columbia House and RCA Music Service picking up the slack and continuing to make the titles available. I'll have a link to this below. So I don't have Never Surrender. I've been looking for it for years. I missed bids on it on eBay. It is just an elusive title on 8-track, and I think if you talk to a lot of classic rock fans and then 8-track collectors in general, they will tell you, yeah, that's not a common title. But I'm not done yet because I've got one more to talk about. So it skips one. So the next one to come out, of course, was in 1984. It happens to be my favorite Triumph album, Thunder 7. For some reason, it's easier to find this than it is to find the one that came out before it. But anyway, this came out in 1984 on MCA Records. By now, they were on MCA Records worldwide. And this was the first. And then, of course, the previous albums got reissued. This is a U.S. Columbia House tape. You can tell by the CRC and just the general look of this once you get to know what they look like. What's kind of neat is that a lot of the Columbia House, US Columbia House 8-tracks would have like a blue border, a square border around the cover art. Here they just have the left and right sides, but it actually goes good with this cover art because there is a little bit of blue in there, and I really like that cover by Dean Motter, and of course based on Da Vinci. But yeah, so that's the last of the Triumph albums to be released on 8-track. Maybe someday I'll have Never Surrender to add. But that's it for my Triumph 8-track collection. Again, I'll have the link to my Unspooled book below. And don't forget, earlier this year, this came out, Magic Power, an all-star tribute to Triumph. I'm not going to go into any detail about that because I'll have the link to my review of this right at the end of this video. So I want to thank everybody for watching this. Let me know, anybody out there got that Never Surrender 8-track. I know some of you must have it. But anyway, yeah, favorite Triumph albums. I'm always up for talking about this band. I'm glad that there's been a little activity with them this year. I want to thank everybody for watching this edition of Tim's Vinyl Confessions. We'll see you later.